Hello everyone, welcome back to the Sports Fall. Jersey Joe Archino back here, and welcome to my Premier League table special series. Of course, we're 10 days away, I can't believe it, from the start of the English Premier League season. So each of these 10 days leading up to the start of the season, I will reveal my top 10. And really, when I say my top 10, I mean this is what the top 10 in the table is going to look like at the end of the season. So every single day, I'll give you the countdown, and we'll start at 10. And we'll work our way to 1. But number 10, and before I really start this, though, I do want to kind of preface it all by saying I think 10 to about 8 is really where there is a placement. And then when you look at 7 to 1, that is where the clubs, there is a considerable drop-off. 7 to 1 is just the best of the best. These are the undisputed clubs, and there is a considerable drop-off from 7 to 1 and everybody else. And when I start off with my number 10, I kind of went back and forth on this. I originally was going to go with Southampton, but the more and more I did my preparation and the more and more I listened to people talk and I heard a few podcasts, I think it became clear that Crystal Palace, to me, was the club to go with to finish in the 10th place in the Premier League table for this upcoming season. And I think massively, when you look at the offseason for Southampton, it's got to be a dramatic stock drop. I mean, you look at them last season, very good. I mean, a sixth place finish in the year that we saw last year in 2015-16, 14 wins, 9 draws, and 11 losses. But still, I mean, when you look at the Premier League and the way that the season was last year with the amount of uncertainty that there was, to finish in 6th, I don't think that's something they can write off too badly. And then, of course, the year before that, they finished in 7th. So they show that improvement last season, but when I look at them and all the players that they sold, I mean, you look at Graziano Pele, of course, moving to the Chinese Super League. I mean, all the guys that really they got their major goal contributions from, like Pele, like Sadio Mane, who has now moved to Liverpool. I think you look at all that, and they've just lost the backbone of where their goal scoring came from. And then, of course, Shane Long is now going to be the main guy. He signs a new 4-year deal there. He has his 7 goals last year, and he's going to be one of the guys, of course, carrying the brunt for Southampton this next season. But to me, I just think they've sold a lot of their backbone, and they're just not going to come into the season the way that things are shaping up. And last season was kind of it. If you were going to have the surprise like we saw, that was going to be it, because the traditional powers all were very down last season. Chelsea was very down. Man United never really found their identity. Manchester City struggled tremendously. Arsenal was probably the one where it was theirs, and it was theirs for the taking, and they didn't do it because Leicester City just had something that no one else did. But I think when you continue to look at it, and now we'll go to Crystal Palace. Palace is a club that I really look at, and I think they're very similar to where Tottenham Hotspur was a few seasons ago, where they're putting the right pieces in place. The infrastructure is there. They're continuing to build some talent, and they have an American infusion in their ownership department. And I do think that does really mean a lot, because whenever you bring that kind of progressive thinking into the picture, it always is going to help you out. And they really have had a pretty good preseason tour as they're leading up to the start of the season, and I just news coming in that Scott Dan is going to be the new captain there, which is another move that I like. But I think the reason that really made me choose Crystal Palace as the 10th place team is listening to the Men in Blazers podcast. If you don't listen and you're a fan of the Premier League or just soccer and other funny things in general, I would take a listen. It's a very good podcast, very informative, and just full of something different. But on their podcast a couple weeks ago, they brought on Alan Pardew, and if you don't know, Alan Pardew is the manager of Crystal Palace, and they had on Scott Dan. And when I listen to Pardew talk, he's just a guy to me who's very self-aware. He's very self-aware of himself, of his club's position, where they want to go. And last season, I think when you look at Crystal Palace, they get to the FA Cup final. They lose 2-1 to United. Very controversial with some calls that obviously went United's way. But that was big for a club that has so much young talent and has an infusion in an identity that they're seeking. NBC did a series where they kind of followed them through a section of their season, and I just think you look at them, and obviously Crystal Palace is not a traditional power by any means, doesn't have the financial power that some of these other clubs do have, but sometimes I think what Leicester City showed is you can build a club over time a certain way, and I do think Crystal Palace is building their club in the right way. It was definitely disappointing for me last season because in 2014-15, you look at the way that they finished their year, 13 wins, 9 draws, and then 16 losses, and then last season, finish in 15th place, a major dropping 5 spots from the year before with 11 wins, 9 draws, and 18 losses. I think they do get back and climb up to that 10th spot and continue to improve just because they're managed well. You look at some of the offseason signings they made, Steven Mandata, Andres Townsend, and then James Tompkins. They really have brought in some key talent there, and one of the interesting things I do think is at goalkeeper for Crystal Palace. They do have a lot of guys there, and I don't know who is going to emerge as the starter there. Obviously, Southampton signed one of their goalkeepers, Alex McCarthy. And one of the interesting ones is Wayne Hennessy. Now, Hennessy, of course, kind of had all the goalkeepers. They never really had a guy who really locked down a consistent position. It was always kind of on edge of who was going to be the guy retaining that job last season. But now when I look at Wayne Hennessy, a guy like him and what he was able to do with Wales in Euros this summer, I think he played very well. Obviously, that's got to help his confidence out tremendously. But we still don't know, of course, who's going to be the guy there. And Steven Mandata, of course, a goalkeeper in his own right, has every opportunity where he could win the starting job there. Did a lot of great things in Ligue 1, and I think his reputation speaks for himself. But certainly it's nice to have options when it comes to goalkeeper like that for Crystal Palace last season, where they never really did find that consistency and clear-cut guy. But I like Crystal Palace as my 10th place team to finish at the end of the season in the Premier League. They're definitely a club on the rise. I go back to Tottenham Hotspur and I look at where they are now and where they were, and I do think that there are some similarities between Crystal Palace and what they want to do. But Alan Pardew is a very good manager. For a young club like his to have the success they did in the FA Cup, reach the final, really that was a big moment for his club and for their development. I do think they continue to develop from here, but that is number 10. In the next episode, we will move in to the number 9 club, and then, of course, so on and so forth, 8, and then 7 and 6. But I do want to kind of go back to where I started off at the top of this segment, and there just really is a tremendous drop-off between the 7 club and everyone else. I mean, you'll, of course, hear them, and I think everyone has the same idea of who's going to be at the top of the table when it's all said and done, but it's one of those seasons where so many big-name managers have moved into the Premier League. And last season, even the guys who were at the helm of big clubs like Louis van Gaal, and of course, when you look at a guy at everyone else, I mean, around the clock, a lot of these big-name managers, Manuel Pellegrini for Man City, just weren't cutting it for those big clubs. Now you've got Pep Guardiola at City. Now you've got Jose Mourinho at United. Now you've got Conte at Chelsea. It's going to be very different. The top dogs are going to reclaim their place. And when I do get to Leicester, I don't think they fall off the face of the earth at all. In fact, I do, of course, have them finishing in a very good spot. But you'll hear that when it comes. Until the next episode, Jersey Joe Archino here with the Sports Vault. And catch me on Twitter at Joe Archino and on Instagram, Jersey_Joe_Archino. 10 days until the Premier League kicks off. I know everyone's as excited as I am, and I'll see everybody in the next episode.